Hi, welcome. We are here at the Bad Girls of SFF talk. I'm A.Y. Chao. I'm the author of Shanghai Immortal, which has a bad girl in it. And so I am very appreciative of bad girls, or actually I would say badass girls.
Yeah.
Right? And so we're here with Saara, El-Arifi, Tasha, Suri, and Kate Dillon, and Samantha, Shannon. So Saara El-Arifi is the best-selling author of the Ending Fire trilogy, The Final Strike, The Battle Drum, which just came out in May, and Feybound of the Forever War trilogy, which comes out in February 2024. Tasha Suri is the Fantasycon's guest of honor, and she's also the World Fantasy Award-winning author of The Burning Kingdoms, the Books of Amba, and What Souls Are Made Of, as well as some Doctor Who, no, is it Doctor Who? Yeah, Doctor Who. Doctor Who novels. Kate Dillon is the awesome author of Mindwalker and Mindbreaker. And Samantha Shannon is the best-selling author of The Bone Season, and the 10th anniversary edition just came out, so, and the Roots of Chaos duology. So, talking about bad girls, why don't you each introduce us to all of your bad girl characters, however many they are.
I feel like we would be here a really long time.
Okay,
so I'm going to choose my main character.
Yeah, choose, yeah.
She's bad in every sense. She's actually quite irritating. So Saara, the main character of The Final Strike, she starts out irritating. I feel like she gets likeable. I might be wrong. So she is very much a drug addict. She has a drug-received addiction, which is based on opioids. That makes her do a lot of bad things. And fundamentally, it's not the drugs, it's her. She is morally grey in lots of ways, but she's not quite sure. She thinks that she's very moral. I think she's a character that kind of walked into the stage in my mind, and I was like, yes, you need to go on a page, you need a setting. And I just loved exploring that side of her and the chaos that she ignites on the page.
Should we do like rock, paper, scissors? The true bad girl take on what to do. Okay, I'll go next since I started talking.
Yeah,
you're just staring at me in panic, yeah. So I think the Jasmine Throne is the best example of my bad girls in SFF. All the other girls are quite nice. So there were two main characters in that book, Malini and Priya. And Malini is a imprisoned princess, and Priya is a maidservant with secret magic. And Priya is always trying to do the right thing. She kills someone in the first chapter, but she's always trying to do the right thing. One of her first thoughts in the book is about how she could definitely skin a man alive, but she's always trying to do the right thing. And Malini spends most of the book basically drugged against her will and imprisoned, and then she gets her free will back and immediately does something awful. So. Yeah, I forgot where I was going with this, but they're very nice people and they've never done a wrong thing in their lives.
That's so funny because neither have mine. So weird. Still, the main character in Mindwalker, which is the first book in the Mindwalker world, the thing is she actually does think she's doing good, except she works for a corporation called Syntax Technologies, and her power, which isn't really a power, she has a supercomputer in her brain which allows her to take over other people's minds. But she's like, yeah, I'm doing the right thing, obviously, because mind control is definitely a good thing and not a bad thing at all. And then Indra, who is the main character in the second book in the Mindwalker world, which is Mindbreaker, which is a companion novel. She actually does think she's a good girl, because she's from a religious anti-tech cult. So God has literally said you are doing the right thing by rejecting technology. But then it turns out she gets turned into a robot against her will, so she is literally the worst thing that could happen to herself. So, in God's eyes, she's now the absolute worst.
So I'll choose, I have a lot of arguably morally complex women in my books. I'm going to go for Paige, who's the main character of the Bone Season series. Similarly to Syl, can take over people's minds and does like to think that she's doing it in a positive way, but is often...
How?
Not really, no. Look, there's a scene where she jumps into the mind of an actual tyrant, and she's like, this is a good thing, but she sets her own list of rules of what she can and can't do while she's possessing the tyrant lady. But yeah, so she is a character who, again, is always trying to do the right thing. She's trying to take down a tyrannical regime, but she does sometimes take shortcuts to do that, which can have dangerous consequences. So she is often criticised both in and outside of the world for being quite reckless and impulsive. And then in the Roots of Chaos series, again, a lot of morally complex women. I think possibly the most complex one is a character called Caliber, who is a very ancient immortal witch, who does genuinely believe she's doing the right thing. She's trying to address like an ancient magical imbalance in the world, and she believes that she must do anything to do this. It doesn't matter who she kills, like who she has to, what heart she has to break to do this, but she does believe that she's doing the right thing, but there's a lot of death and destruction, so not a lot of people agree with her.
I really want her to step on me.
Oh yeah, no, she's getting she's getting a little fan club actually.
Yeah.
It's kind of fun.
You made her hot.
Yeah,
That's your
yeah.
fault. She's very, very hot.
You were like, she's an ancient immortal witch and she's hot, but don't like her, guys.
Yeah. And she's a shapeshifter, so she can be any kind of hot you want.
So talking about morally grey characters here, what's interesting is I feel like villains and heroes often have a very fine line of, like, between them. It's a question of perspective. So with your characters, which do you prefer writing, like villain or hero, or are they very similar to you?
I like writing a villain who thinks they're the hero. I mean, that's
a good one.
that's the best part about Syl. She legitimately thinks she's doing the right thing. Like, so in the Mindwalker world, basically a nuclear war has decimated the Earth, and technology is necessary for everybody to survive. Syl works for the biggest tech corporation. They do have a lot of tech that does good in the world. It's what's keeping people alive. And she's like, I work for the company that keeps people alive. When I take over other people's bodies, I'm doing it so I can steal tech to keep people alive. And you know, her mind just kind of skirts over the, I'm stealing tech from other people so they can't have it. And you know, I'm forcibly controlling people. You know, not against their will, she does get their consent, but the entire book is about, like, what does it mean to get consent when somebody has no other choice but to give it? But yeah, it takes, like, you know, a fair bit of the book for her to be like that, you know, maybe mind control isn't good, actually. Maybe a company that controls everybody's lives isn't good, actually.
Yeah, I'm going to jump on that, because actually I think that's a really interesting concept of the idea of the hero that you're writing is actually the villain in someone else's eyes, and I think that's definitely the case with Saara. So she's raised in a rebellion, Sandstorm Rebellion, and very much thinks that she's doing the right thing, no matter how many people she has to kill. And in some ways, you can totally understand that perspective. It's extreme, but I'm not a murderer, guys, but like, I just realised, I was like, yeah, mass destruction. But you can understand why she thinks that she's the hero, and I think the book is fundamentally about her realising that she's not, and then repositioning the idea of hero. But then, you know, hero, villain, it's a construct, and we can decide what we are. Today I'm a villain.
Always.
Shut up!
I was just thinking that when I write straight up villains, they're usually like very villainous. They do think they're right, but they're clearly very wrong. And it's very fun to kill them. But I do think that the whole idea of like somebody can think of themselves as a protagonist but be a villain is a really interesting one. And one of the things I really love to explore is the idea that you can absolutely believe you're doing what's best and still cause chaos, destruction, and havoc. And I think that's quite fun to play with the
I
protagonists.
love that smile, like chaos, destruction, havoc.
What got me.
Love it.
Yeah, it is interesting that arguably a villain is just someone whose intentions conflict with that the protagonist. So the main antagonist of the Bone Season series, she wants to take over humankind and control humankind, which I think most humans would agree is a bad thing, that we have our free will usurped. But the way she sees it, humans are massively destructive, have constant wars with each other, you know, poisoning our own planet. So she sees it as saving humans because we clearly can't control ourselves, but she can. And when she uses our own methods against us, she kind of, you know, my main character says to her, well, you know, yeah, we have wars, but you are doing a cruel thing by essentially oppressing us. And she says, well, you oppress each other, so why shouldn't I oppress you? And then I deliberately wrote that conversation between them, where they kind of level with each other for a second, and they're like, oh, we kind of see each other and each other, we've just agreed that we have totally different aims and we must destroy each other for this reason. And again, with Caliber and the Roots of Chaos, like she does genuinely believe she's doing the right thing. It's just that the ways that she does that conflicts with the goals of the protagonists. But yeah, it's very interesting, and it is a fine line, and I really love exploring that moral complexity.
Yeah, I like the calling it morally complex rather than morally gray, because morally gray makes it sound like, oh, they're either amoral or just don't give a shit. But actually, all of your characters have a very strong strength of will and belief in what they're doing. I mean, they're not just doing it just whatever, we're just gonna do it. It's all like there's meaning and motivation that aligns and is logical.
It depends if the character's on drugs or not.
Okay, so that does that, but then you're like, oh, well, that makes sense too, because, you know, it's being pushed by a very particular kind of motivation.
I don't know, Sam just won me over to the bone season side. I'm now firmly anti-Paige. Everything you said, I'm like, actually, she's not wrong.
Well, there's a great scene in book 5 actually, but just picking up what Saara was saying about the hero being the villain of someone else's story. There's a really, like, a side plot in Bone Season 3 where Paige basically arrives in Manchester. She causes total chaos and accidentally causes the overthrow of like a Mancunian clairvoyant leader. And then she just breezes off like nothing happened. And I was like, to this Mancunian woman, Paige is a villain. Like, she's just come in, completely messed up the whole situation, and then just run off and just left the city in absolute chaos. And there was a great moment, probably shouldn't say this, but we're all secret here. So in book 5, there's a moment where I deliberately made that comeback to haunt Paige, to kind of have that woman be like, you are a dick. Paige is like, no, actually, you're right, I am a dick, I apologise. So
That makes me think of, like, you know in Avatar The Last Airbender and the Cabbage Man?
Oh,
This is our people.
It's like the cabbage man on the bone seats, and it's like, you're a dick. Yeah. Give me my cabbage back.
So, okay, going into the idea of, oh wow. Okay. You're all looking at me, and now my mind's gone blank. No, strong female protagonists and how they have changed over the course of, I would say, like many years, like over the decades, right? You know, I would say when I grew up, there was She-Ra, Princess of Power, and she was like He-Man's equivalent. You know, she was strong, just like him. You know, she could punch people and do that. But I think that's changed. And how has that impacted how you've been writing your characters? I mean, I think that their strengths come from very different places.
Pick one. This is an attack. So something I really kind of wanted to explore with the Mindwalker books was that the female protagonists are strong, but they're not necessarily strength strong. Like, it's not a, you know, I can beat this man at an arm wrestle. I wanted to play with a world that, so Syl is, at the beginning of the first book, she is the best mind walker syntax technologies I've ever seen, and I wanted that to just be the status quo. It's not like I'm better than all the guys, I have to prove myself. She is just good, and she knows it, and everybody knows it, and it's just not questioned. Like, it's not a world where she has to prove that she's better than all the men. She just has to be really good, and she is really good. And strength, I think, comes in many forms, and her strength is not necessarily physical strength. She is very, very well trained, but her strength comes from understanding her technology, working with her technology, making good decisions, arguably, although, you know, you need conflict and a lot, so some of the decisions are really, really bad. So that's the kind of strong female protagonist I wanted to kind of explore. And then Indra is kind of like the opposite to that. She literally has all the strength. Like, she's basically Hulk smash. She has this robot body. She can turn her strength up to whatever she wants. She can turn off her pain. She can do everything. But the idea with Indra is that all that strength is absolutely meaningless if you have no idea what you're doing with it, and you're just making poor decision after poor decision, and all you're doing is making things worse. Like, strength alone isn't enough.
Would you rather have inner strength or outer strength then? So would you be Syl or would you be Indra?
You know what?
You want to smash things, don't you?
I really do, but I also want a Jarvis in my head. Like, Syl Supercomputer is called Jarvis because I'm a huge Marvel fan, and you know, it's got Paul Bettany's voice, and I do kind of want a friend in my head with Paul Bettany's voice. I want Paul in my head! I'm not ashamed. I am now.
You want a man telling you what to do?
Yes. No, Jarvis doesn't tell her what to do. Jarvis gives her the options, and she makes the decision. Jarvis has to do what she says. I haven't read this book in a while. I've been focused on book 2, but I will go back and check.
Jarvis is like our administrative assistant. She's
Yes.
like, give me the maps.
Exactly.
She's like, oh yes, right away.
He's her PA. I want Paul Bettany
So
to
you
be
wanna
my
be the
PA. Yes. Really? We're going there this early?
Yeah, it's too
It's like
early.
10:30 in the morning.
I've forgotten the question.
Oh god, why are we put on the same funnel?
Okay, I have very strong feelings on the term strong female character, and I once gave a 45-minute lecture about this at a different convention, so I'll try to condense
Sounds
it
like
down.
you're already.
I'll try to condense it a lot. So basically, I was first published 10 years ago. It's my 10th author anniversary this year, and at the beginning of my career, I distinctly remember I was in Madrid being interviewed, and the guy said to me, "So why didn't you write a strong female character like Katniss Everdeen?" And this was the great haunting of the early stage of my career. Every single female character was being compared to Katniss Everdeen. It didn't matter who you were. It's like, but it didn't happen to male characters. Like, not every male character was being compared to like Sherlock Holmes. It's like you'd have a completely set, like a Dan Brown character. You never heard Dan Brown being asked, "So why is Robert Langdon like Sherlock Holmes?" But we were all being compared to Katniss. Katniss is a great character. I really love her. And I think the thing that was different about Katniss was that we just had, the last phenomenon was Twilight, right? So Bella Swan is a character who has what we might describe as conventionally feminine interests and pursuits. Like, she wants to get married and have kids, doesn't want to smash people, although I think she does eventually do that, I can't remember. But yeah, so then Katniss came along, and she was much more classically masculine. She had traits like stoicism, really bad with her emotions, she's very good at fighting, she's literally the hunter-gatherer. And I think that after that, there was a period that if every female character wasn't like that, that was considered strong. You had to embody these traditionally masculine traits. And I had a big problem with that, because I think there's many different kinds of strength. It doesn't just have to be beating up and fighting. And again, it can be fun with characters like Katniss. And there's a whole different conversation about Katniss actually being quite vulnerable and more complex than that blueprint was making out. But yeah, I think now the conversation is more nuanced. I think we're saying, women can be politically strong, for example. You can be a brilliant speaker. You can want to get married and have kids while also being able to beat people up. And I think that that conversation is way more complex now than it was a decade ago. So I'm really pleased about that.
I think the first thing that I think of when I saw this question was the trope of the black, strong woman. And that's something that has plagued me personally and also haunted me through many books. This idea that black women have to have an innate strength because of the oppression that we have, it's just so jarring, and it is exhausting that we are expected to just constantly be, you know what, yeah, racism exists, but I'm strong. And that's not okay. Sometimes I don't want to be strong, sometimes I want to be broken, and I think that's why I am always going to explore black broken women and try and put them back together, and for me that's my own kind of magic that heals me internally.
Oh, that's really beautiful. I want to follow that. So I
don't just talk about pegging.
And there it is.
Alright,
Did anybody time how long that took to happen?
So for those of you who don't know, Saara brings up pegging in every single panel. This is not she's on.
And we always see how
The evidence is before you, my friends.
Tasha actually started
I
this.
did not start this. I'm innocent. Anyway, that aside, let's talk about craft. Let's keep things serious.
Alright, okay, so
Yeah.
let's do a craft question. How do you write your characters so that they are both flawed, vulnerable, broken, likable? Is likable a term that you think about when you're crafting characters, or let's talk about that.
Likability.
And not pegging.
So we can't talk about pegging.
You can, but
Okay. I can't even figure out a way to bring it up in this context. It's just try.
We'll give you bonus points.
No, I'm going to leave it to you, Saara. I don't want to take your, steal your thunder. So I think likability is a difficult term, because I think anyone who's written any character, never mind, specifically a woman, knows that there's always going to be someone that hates them for some reason. Like, oh, she was mean, or she was too soft, she didn't do enough, she did too much, So you can't win on that basis. I think what you have to do is write a character that you like, that you empathise with, that you enjoy being in the mind of. So that's really important. I don't really have anything to add beyond that. I really love my protagonists because I can feel who they are as people. And are they likable? I don't really care, frankly, you know? But I also think that failing that, it's nice to bring a bit of step on the energy.
You do that so well.
Melanie has such good step on the energy.
Yeah.
That's it, really.
I want her to be holding a sword, and when she does it, she looks off with a sword.
On the second cover of the Burning Kingdoms, there's a character called Marley, and she's holding a sword and coming towards you looking really angry. And when the cover was revealed, I had the most unhinged comments from people. All, as far as I could tell, all sapphics and lesbians who were like, I just want her to step on me, I want her to choke me. And I was like, guys, this is the internet.
Actually, I'm going to step in here and say,
Are you?
Come on, man.
That was so good.
Yeah, I'm just going to reword that right now. I'm retracting the word likable because male characters never have to be likable.
Yeah.
Ever.
Yeah.
It's never a term that's applied to them. Oh, they are not very likable. Let's make them more likable. So I retract that.
Yeah.
So continue.
But I think that's
Stepping
part
on.
of the conversation,
Yeah,
right?
yeah,
There
that's
is like
the-
Yeah.
Well, I think that's actually, the step on me thing is a new and good development, I think. Because again, I'm making myself sound 100 years old, but back in my day, at the beginning of my career, there was not this step on me thing. Like, that just did not exist. And I feel like female characters were judged really heavily for qualities that would be considered kind of rakish in men, like arrogance, for example. You see a lot of arrogant male characters and everyone really likes them. I mean, how many kind of smirking alpha males have we seen in fiction? Everyone always loves them and they thinks they're really sexy and cool. If you put those traits in a female character, you know, but certainly at the beginning of my career, you would get really harsh reviews about that. Like, oh, she's so unlikable, like she's so arrogant, she's so vain, I hate her. And again, now we have much more of the step on me thing. And I do think that's a really positive development because that was just not around at the beginning. And now if you have a female character who is like villainous and arrogant and kind of, again, has traits that used to be considered like innately masculine, like I think a lot more people are appreciative of that now. And I'm happy to be working in this era.
I think just moving it away from just likability, a challenge for keeping the reader with my characters, especially in book 2 of the world, because Indra has all this power, but she is incredibly naive, she is incredibly sheltered. It's a huge challenge for me in order to keep the reader on board was to make sure they're not questioning her awful decisions in the moment that she's making them, because something that happens to female characters, particularly, especially younger female characters, is that readers tend to either get frustrated when they're making bad choices, or be like, oh my god, this character is so stupid, she did all these stupid things, I had to DNF the book, she was just, you know, like, and they're particularly harsh with female characters, like, you know, if you've read, for example, the Red Rising books, which are, you know, a similar vein of kind of sci-fi, they're a bit more spacey than the Mindwalker books. They're 100% more spacey than the Mindwalker books, which are not in space. Yeah, I just heard that back, and yeah, it didn't make any sense.
Yeah.
But Darrow, the main character in that, makes so many bad decisions, but like that's totally fine for a male character. For a female character, it's harder because the second they make a mistake, it's like, oh my god, she was the worst. She like couldn't make a good decision. And Indra makes no good decisions. Like there is not a single good decision in this book. And that's a really hard thing to do with a female character because people are looking for reasons to say, I hated her, she was no good, she didn't do the plot any favors, she just backed herself into corners. So a huge craft element of that was so much time spent trying to keep the reader on side. You know, when Indra is making that decision, I had to get the reader to make the same decision for her. They had to be like, this is the only thing that can happen in this moment. And then 5 seconds later, when it turns out that that was actually the worst thing she could have possibly done, that's when the reader had to catch up and be like, oh yeah, that's a horrible thing to have done. Because if they had that thought, you know, as it was happening, I really feel like people would have started to really critique the book and, you know, come down on Indra hard. So that was the biggest challenge, I think, especially with that character. Sil was easier because I don't know why people really just liked her and let her get away with stuff. And I would like that for me personally.
Forget about context as well, like mental illness, for example, or trauma. Both of those things can cause you to make poor decisions, or like Silo's drug addiction in the final strike. Like I think people sometimes forget about that context. Like, you know, mental illness can make you, or certainly me, act in ways that are not necessarily logical. And same with the character who is traumatized. They're often coming from a place of trauma and not making logical decisions.
Yeah, and I think, sorry, cat hair. I bring them with
How?
me. They're everywhere. So I think that's really interesting, actually, like picking up on both those points. I didn't really, like Tasha said, think about likability when I was writing. These characters just come to me and I just kind of go, what are you doing? And also the idea of what we talked about earlier about like a broken character was really important to me, and exploring trauma through things like addiction. And so it almost surprised me when people were like, Sila's really annoying for the first 2/3, but by the end I'll die for her, which is great. Like, it's great, and I actually love, you know, strong feelings about any character. But I was kind of like, that's not the point. It's not about liking her. Yeah, so I guess just drawing that to a close.
I actually want to turn it back on our moderator for a
Yeah.
moment, because I think you're a really good example of like
deer in the headlights.
No, not you specifically, but you know.
Okay. My character. Oh yeah. So my character is it's very interesting because for me, I think she's adorable. She's a little asshole.
She is adorable.
She's very
Cute little asshole.
she's very rude and vulgar, and I mean, okay, she epitomizes that Barbie speech. Like, she's the woman who, like, she's too vulgar, she's not demure enough, she says all the things she shouldn't say, she speaks her mind, which people really don't like. And you know, as women, we're not used to doing that. We're conditioned not to be forthright, and when you are forthright, it makes people very uncomfortable. And she has no problem. She's pure it. She's like, pops in her head, out her mouth. You know, yeah. And I actually found her really cathartic to write that way, because there's so many constraints on how women should behave, and we're told so much. And this is like a character who's like, yeah, fuck you all. I'm gonna do whatever I want to do. I'm gonna run naked. Who cares? I'm gonna spit at you. Yeah. So.
None of those things are exaggerations, by the way.
Yeah, she's yeah. So yeah, that was really hard though, like balancing that. And it's interesting in reviews, people are very, like, she's Marmite. People really react very strongly. Like, either they love her and are like, yeah, they champion whatever she wants to do, or they're like, ew, she's so gross. Like, you know, and I'm like, you know, okay, she is gross. And, like, what can you do? You know, you have to be true to yourself, I guess. True to your little monsters inside. Okay, going back to, you did mention death, in totally different context, but we're gonna go there. And I really like this game you guys play, where you take your character and a favorite weapon, and you pit them against each other in like a virtual, I don't know, Hunger Games type thing, and you decide amongst you who is gonna die first, who is going to survive and like take all the spoils.
Okay, which characters are we going with?
And
I mean, so look, last time we had a man on the panel, so it was really easy to decide who to kill.
No, but that was the writer. We were killing off the writer.
We were killing off the writer, not the character.
Oh, Ian. What character are you going with?
I think this feels like cheating. I'm going to go with Priya,
Okay.
because she has the literal power
Yes.
of the cosmos, but
In a
through
concrete
nature.
bunker.
But she's a concrete bunker. Well, if she can take a houseplant in, she's fine.
She can't.
No, there's no houseplants.
There's no houseplants.
No plants.
I'm pretty sure that if you go beyond the concrete bunker, there will be plants that she could summon that could come in. It's not like
Not in
concrete
my
is a
world, there would be.
Kryptonian or something.
Okay, so
Kryptonite.
So avoid the world of Mindbreaker.
We're in the world of Mindbreaker, so no
No,
plants.
that wasn't a disclaimer that we were putting on this. I think you should be in my world. Yeah.
Everything is dead.
yeah, everything's dead.
Everything is dead.
Everything is dead. I don't think this is fair, because you guys can have guns and I've got
No, I've
guns.
got no guns.
This is not fair.
I've just got blood.
Depends who I pick.
Blood goes with you wherever
Yeah,
you go.
exactly.
Right? Like,
Okay, yes, fine, let's go.
Okay, no, she has to have a house plant. That'll be her.
Okay, you have a house plant. Priya with a house
One
plant.
can I have cactus?
So you can't be Indra.
Why can't I be
Because
Indra?
you'll literally just smash us.
That's
Yeah.
the idea. This is the game.
I'm just trying to figure out how to win.
I'm gonna be Indra, who can both smash them and has a gun. So I've got like both.
Okay.
Okay.
I've got Silo and she's got her blood. she can draw into rooms.
If
But she can only push you away.
I mean, that works.
Yeah,
Really
really
fast.
fast.
So basically, it's going to be like 4 cats in a room in the corners. No one's actually going to die. It's just going to
Well,
be
it
shit.
depends on who you choose.
Wait,
Yeah.
Well, it depends. Can I bring a magical orange into the room?
Oh, well, she's got a house plan.
Yeah.
Yeah, no, if I have a magical orange, it
What if we
means...
share an orange tree?
Sure, that would be great.
Why are you sharing your weapon?
Well, maybe we can help each other
You
until
did
the
say
last
we
minute.
couldn't ally.
Yeah.
Okay, we're right.
We're going together then.
I'm sorry, I'm with Indra over here.
Okay, I'm going to go with Esbar from A Day Before the Night because she's the best, probably, mage in the Priory, so she can just burn you all.
So you're going to be eating oranges over
How are you
there?
going to
Yeah.
burn
We're
me?
gonna
I'm
be-
made of
Yes,
metal,
literally.
indestructible metal.
But can fire burn metal if you try hard enough?
I mean, it can, but we're talking
Can it
like
rust?
the sun.
We just
Are you the
water
sun?
Water and fire.
Yeah.
couldn't plants go into her joints and
Yeah, that's what we're
No,
going
she
to do.
has
Lock her up.
How are you getting
You
into
did the plants
You
through
could
your
hold
mouth.
skin.
Okay.
Skin
I
right?
draw blood runes on you that
Okay.
pushes them away,
Love it.
and so then we just sit in a corner of the bunker.
Yeah.
We steal the orange plant, eat the oranges.
Alright, so stalemate. Okay, we have a stalemate. Okay.
Yeah. It would be chaos. That's what we've concluded.
Stalemate except for oh no, you have to all share your oranges. or
What
you'll
happened to
starve death.
solidarity between women? I think we should get out of this bunker.
Where's the system?
Yeah.
We need to turn this
I
into
feel like I would
six
like let's all turn against each other.
We should have said we'll all just be friends.
Okay, next time we're bringing Ian again because
Yeah,
you know,
kill him.
we have a
Alright, I have
common
another
enemy.
question. So this is another one similar. It's kiss, marry, kill. And which of all the main characters that you've talked about, which would be your kiss, marry, kill choice?
As in our own choice or our character's choice?
Let's
Our
make it your
choice, right?
Yeah, our choice.
choice.
Okay.
Oh,
But not
okay.
of our own characters,
okay.
right? Because that feels weird.
Yeah, not of your own characters. Like of all the characters on this panel, who would you kiss, marry, kill?
I would marry Bhumika from Tasha.
Oh yeah, what a
I
milk.
mean, she's single now. So.
I know.
She's also fictional.
But in my mind.
Are you ready to be a mom? That's
Sure.
That's it.
If
Yeah.
for Bhumika,
Okay,
I
that's
would
taken
do
a
it.
new
To
road.
clarify, Bhumika in one of my books is we call her the milk. Sorry, but she has a kid. Yeah.
I'm fine with that.
Newborn.
Yeah.
Yes. Newborn. Yeah. Well, not
So
newborn.
sorry, I have to kill Paige because there can only be one mind walker.
Only one, yes.
Yeah.
Paige is a dream walker and Syl is a mind walker.
Walker.
It's like
There
the
can only
same
be one
thing,
walker.
just science or fantasy, basically. Okay.
I think I'd kill Indra.
How?
And then no, it doesn't.
Okay, fine.
There's no how in this.
She's just
And then I can wear her skin.
I think
She actually can, like,
really creepy.
No, wait, I know
That's
it
worse
sounds
than it
weird,
is.
but in chapter 1 of Mindbreaker, Indra literally gets new skin. So she could actually wear
Yeah,
her
and
skin.
it's like-
it's
and
a
it's like
thing that
really
is
It doesn't
natural.
become less creepy without.
It's a little less
So the skin is called flesh mesh, which is like the worst
Oh,
term.
wow.
I'm so proud of Flesh Mesh.
It's so gross.
Stop saying it.
It's so British.
It's
It's so grotesque.
I would kiss a Noor, I think.
Oh,
yeah.
No, I'm marrying
Noor
Noor.
is-
Yeah.
I think she'd be great as a wife.
I just don't think we'd get on, like, but I think we could kiss. It's fine.
I kiss Tyler.
Tyler,
I
oh,
kiss
she'd be good
Tyler.
at it as
Yeah.
well.
Oh, I know.
You just knew.
Yeah.
Sorry, good at what?
Oh, kissing.
Okay, alright. I missed the part that I was like,
I just went on a separate like silent daydream there.
alright. Going back to craft, we'll have one more question and then I'll open the floor to, I'll have one more question, then I will open the floor to you for questions. So tropes, situations, assumptions, is there anything specific that you loved or you love to put into your stories and anything specific that you completely want to avoid in your stories?
Oh, battles. I hate battles.
You can't avoid them.
I know. It's so depressing. I just find them boring. It's like how many ways can you say, I slashed, I punched, I kicked? And it's like you just want to get to the result, which is who wins. Anyway, I'm fine.
Are you? I really like twists. I think that is just like my crack. It's just I just love trying to figure out ways to con the reader, and I always see one that I want them to figure out. So I was like, you know, so you're like, you have this false sense of security, like I figured it out. And then there's always one that you will hopefully not see coming, and then there's just like normally a couple more that I just throw in. And I love that. I just love tracking it and love seeding it. And I will continue to keep seeding it. One of my friends, Hannah, just read Feybound and she was like, I figured it all out. I've got it. I've got you this time. And she listed out like 4 twists, and she got them all right. But there was a 5th one, and she just messaged me. She's like, "Fuck you."
For the record, I did the same with the battle drum, except I'm not good like Hannah, and I was just like, I figured it out. I know who the killer is, and I text it, and Saara was just like, I'm not going to tell you if you're right or wrong, but you are so wrong, it's painful. I was so wrong,
so
it was
confident.
painful. I was so confident I was right. Mine is it's a really small thing, and it's largely because I play kind of in that YA crossover space, but you will very rarely, or actually never, hear my characters referred to as pretty. Because for the longest time in YA, a character was defined by how pretty she was, how attractive she was to the male love interest. And Syl does have a male love interest, but her appearance, her attractiveness is actually never brought up in an explicit way. I don't think it's brought up about Indra as well, but Indra is in a very different situation, so it was Mindwalker specifically that I wanted to avoid that in. And there was one scene in particular where I think in the very first draft, there was, the love interest said something along the lines of, you know, why are the pretty ones always out of their minds? And like, as soon as I wrote it, I was like, I hate this line, this is the worst line, this is not making it into the book. And the actual line that made it into the book was very, very different. It was kind of like, why are the interesting ones always out of their minds? And I was just like, I don't want her to be seen as pretty. I want her to be seen as interesting and competent and strong, but in, you know, non-physical ways. And that's something I try really hard to do with my female characters.
I think it could be like benignly sexist as well in a way, because it's like, if you're the most beautiful woman in the world, like why are you comparing your beauty to other women? It's kind of, yeah.
I just like writing yearning, like, that's it.
Yeah,
pretty much.
You're so good at it, so.
Thank you. I also don't really like writing fight scenes. I like knife to the throat scenes, but they're slightly different, like emotionally.
They're sexy.
They're basically yearning.
Yeah, just yearning with a knife. Yeah.
Did you go already?
Yeah, battle scenes.
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
No. Saara, did you?
No, you didn't.
Yeah, I talked about tropes. Twisty.
Oh, you
yeah,
did.
of course,
Yes,
yeah.
yeah, you did. Okay,
I was
great.
like, did I dream
Yeah.
that?
I'm sorry. You should have all been like, yeah, no, you didn't.
God, honestly, wasn't that interesting?
Okay, so we're gonna open up to the floor. Does anybody have questions? Right, I'm gonna go 1, 2, 3. So, Gracious.
To all 5 panelists, have you ever had a moment where you've just written something, read through it again, and you thought to yourself, what the fuck did I just write?
Oh my God, every day.
The thing is, this is going into the book. It fits very well. But what do I say? And also, Kate, I'm fully directing this at you because that thing you posted about chapter 19 was like, saying, oh, thanks for reminding me of that.
Yeah, my chapter 19s are like, I don't know what it is. I don't plot my books, so I don't know how it always happens in chapter 19, but chapter 19 is always the worst.
Because genuinely, I can't look at the word burnout the same again. But also, genuinely, anyone else, but also, you now have the benchmark of near permanent trauma.
We're all very deeply insecure, like so much more deeply insecure than you could have ever. Sorry to call you all out.
Why do all our panels?
Saara, what are you doing?
Why do all our panels end up as therapy sessions?
We all need therapy,
Because
that's
it's
why.
helpful, okay?
But yes, like I wrote 500 words this morning. I was like, that's just hot shit, like it is, and that's okay because the best thing about writing is that you can edit. Honestly, the first draft of Final Strike that I sold, I'm like, how did I sell this? This is so bad. And they're like, yeah, but we see potential. I'm like, yeah, that's the way of saying like it was bad. And honestly, all my first drafts and like my 0 drafts are just the worst. And that's the case with most writers, to be honest.
I think on the other side, sometimes you do write gold and you don't know how you did
Yes.
it. Yeah.
Yeah.
Like one scene I kind of wrote off the cuff and wasn't expecting to write. It is a spoiler for the Jasmine Throne, I apologise. Was I wrote a scene where a character had to find out that her husband was still alive, essentially, which was a bad thing. So this person came and was like, bad news, my lady, your husband isn't dead, essentially. I can't remember the exact phrasing. I think it was better than that. And I remember writing it and going, oh, that was really cool. I really enjoyed that. It doesn't happen very often, but sometimes your brain does something better than you could consciously do.
You read it back and you're like, who wrote this?
I feel like there's two modes. Like you either read something back, it's like this is hot flaming trash. How would I ever publish? This is the worst thing anyone's ever written. Or sometimes, like if I'm in a certain mood, this happens so rarely. It's like the 1%. I'll open it up and be like, wow, you are amazing. What a genius. What a day genius. And then I sink back into depression. But anyway.
I'm so glad to hear this because I'm working on book 2 right now, and I'm just like, what is this flaming pile of shit?
I have a theory about this. So what you're doing when you're writing a new draft, for anybody who writes, if you've written one story and you finish it to the end, you're like, yeah, that was great, and you start a new one and you're like, oh, this is so bad. It's because when you finish something, you've built your craft, you've got to know the story, you've got to know the characters, you've maybe edited a bit along the way, you've shaped it, you've polished it, and then when you go back to the beginning, you're starting from scratch. You're starting with like a peanut and 2 sticks, and you've got to build a pony.
That's great. That's really good. Yeah.
That's brilliant. You just can't that right now.
Yeah.
That sounds like an ancient.
I'm actually trying to make a pony.
It's not possible.
I love you so much.
So good.
Guest of honor, Tasha, Suri.
My favorite thing about that question is something I've realized with specifically book 2, so Mindbreaker, is that my internal bar for how bad things are is completely broken. So I was looking at Mindbreaker as my whimsical, happy novel. So book 2, I was just like, she's younger, she's more naive, this book is so whimsical. I actually thought it was going to be a problem. That people
But the first chapter, like people turn to goo.
Yeah, and I forgot about that, okay? And I was having a conversation, I was just like, I haven't killed enough people, nobody dies. In this book, nobody dies.
So many people.
I forgot the massacre, and I forgot the deaths. And then I read them back and I was like, oh. Yeah, so sometimes I look over stuff and I'm like, yeah, this is actually really dark.
I moderated her launch the other night, and she was like, yeah, it was like a problem thinking about how many people I could kill. I was like, what?
Sometimes, like, so, you know, in the first draft, I'd killed so many people from the world there was actually none left to sustain the world. I had to populate it back up.
Oops.
It's so whimsical.
Okay, so question number 2, Clyde, sure.
Any male or trans male author that you like that's write about bad girls and queer stories? Male or trans male authors that write about the bad girls in their novel.
Oh, I just want to use this as an excuse to recommend Lee Mandello. I don't know how well Lee writes women. I actually don't care. But Lee's books are amazing horror novels. And they do, and I think it's also like, not to get on a soapbox, but I think it's really important for authors of all genders to write really interesting stories about men and masculinity, as well as masculinity outside of like the cisgendered heteronormative, because there are so many men who are marginalized in so many ways that are significant, especially, you know, trans men and binary people, and Lee's books are just bloody fantastic, and I want more people to read them, so Lee Mandello.
I think I'm also going to just recommend a male author whose books I really love and who I think writes women well is Lavi Tiddar's The Escapement. I think that's one of the best books of all time. Like, I was at a convention with Lavi in France, and he was like, yeah, I wrote this book, and there's a scene where somebody is performing surgery on a clown to find out why it's not funny. I was like, this is somehow like utterly unhinged, and yet the best pitch I've ever heard. I read it in one day, I think it's amazing, please read it.
I'm going to recommend T.L. Huchu's The Library of the Dead.
I love that was my one.
Oh, I'm sorry. The second one out. Yeah, his main protagonist, Ropa, is just fabulous. A really nice, a really badass girl. She's lovely. I wouldn't say she's nice, but yeah. She's great. She's really entertaining.
There are 2 trans men authors in the YA space, Aidan Thomas and, if I get this in the wrong order, please forgive me, Andrew Joseph White.
Good choice.
Who do some incredible work in the YA space.
detail who she was mine.
Yeah.
So.
Can I recommend two more? Sorry, you got me going.
Didn't catch it last week. Can you repeat that?
Oh, Andrew Joseph White.
So is it Seth Dixon or Seth Dickinson who wrote the Traitor Barrow Cormorant? Okay. Thank you. Yeah, that's an amazing book, and also P. Jelly Clark. Yeah, really writes great women.
Yeah.
Question number 3, yes.
A lot of what you've been talking about, and a lot of books that have these sort of badass women characters, they tend to be, like, there's a reason that the panel's called girls rather than women. And so does any of this conversation change? And this is kind of particularly directed at Samantha, because I know you have written older female characters who are massive badasses, but kind of to anyone, how does it change how you do that when the character you're writing isn't a girl, she's a woman, or an older woman?
Can I hop in there just really quickly about terminology, women and girls? I read this really interesting article recently, and it was basically that woman is a term, like I will refer to myself as a girl if I'm like doing something fun myself, girls night out, whatever. If I'm talking about things that are like burdensome, like adult burdensome things like expectations and obligations, like, oh, as a woman, decades of menstruation, child care, domestic labor, all of that stuff, I will say woman. Like I won't say, oh, it's a woman's night out, because of the connotation and the stigma, like in my mind, the negative feelings I have about the term woman and what that entails and the expectations, all that baggage around there. So, like, I don't know that this panel being called bad girls necessarily excludes older women, but
No, definitely. We just used it because it sounded better than bad.
I thought it was because of that song, Live Fast, Die Young, Bad Girls Do It Well.
It is now.
Okay.
Yeah.
I love that song. It was in the Vampire Academy movie. Nobody needed to know that.
yeah, this last
I think there's definitely a conversation to be had around that in certain contexts. Like, I think one of the good examples is when publishers kept calling books like The Girl on the Train, for example, but you never saw like the boy in the high tower. Like it never applies to men. And I think there's definitely a conversation about how that's used in a commercial sense. Like there might be some books called boy when it's referring to a man, but I do think in certain contexts it can be infantilizing. But again, it just depends on your like personal preference. Personally, I try to use woman more. I don't really relate so much to the word girl anymore. In terms of like the older characters, it was really important to me. So with my new novel, A Day of Fallen Night, I have 2 warrior characters who are in their 50s. And one of the things that was important to me was that they had already been through childbirth and finding their partner, because I think that's often presented as the kind of natural conclusion of a woman's story, like the happy ending. And I still wanted them to go through those things, like for Tanuva, who's the perspective character, like love and having a child was really important to her. But that's happened like 30 years before the start of the plot, so it's very much part of her story but not the conclusion. So that was the kind of driving force behind that decision. And I loved it so much. Like there was so much, like to have a character with 50 years behind them was just so wonderful, because they have all that experience, and she has like this 30-year relationship with her partner. And I just thought it was great, and I would like to do it again.
Great. I think, do we have time for one? No, we don't have time for one. Okay, so that's it. Thank you so much for coming, and yeah, round of applause for our bad girls of SFF.